Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, this week's topic came from a discussion that I was having with my friend, the owner of the paw stand, the pet store where Dolly gets her food. And she's a big fan of mine as far as local politics and stuff, and so we always chat about things. And she was asking about this new business of mine, like, what exactly is the draw? Like, she was trying to understand, like, what HiFi audio is all about. She's like, well, I've got, like, a Bluetooth speaker that we listen to music around the house to, and I listen to music in my car, and I'm trying to understand, like, what this even is, and why somebody would spend money on something like this. And I was trying to explain to her, like, what you're talking about is what I call casual music listening, which we all enjoy. I mean, to me, that's almost the best part of music, is when you can listen to it in your car and, you know, it's all fun, and then you can listen to it like in background. We used to, you know, when I worked at the shop, we had a stereo with music playing in the background, and while, you know, I'm doing my work stuff, we used to listen to country music and listen to country music playing, and, you know, it's just, having music in life is a good thing. But this is something different. And I was trying to explain to her about how this, to me, and it's why I'm a big fan of vinyl, is it's the ritual of it. Like, okay, I'm going to listen to music now for the next hour, and I'm not going to do anything else. And you're not doing other chores around the house or whatever. It's like, it's time to go listen to music. And so you pull the vinyl out, you clean it off, you put it on the turntable, you turn on the stereo, and if it's a tube amp, you know, you've had the amp on for a few minutes to warm the tubes up, because almost all of these sound better after the tubes have been warming up for 5 or 10 minutes, in my experience. And to me, it's the same kind of thing as, you know, lighting a bunch of candles and getting in a tub bath. It's just a relaxing kind of ritual. But to me, this can transcend all of that. And it came to me when this stuff's all working right, and when you've got a system that's like everything is working in concert together, it's a form of virtual reality. And like the VR headsets, you know, that's for your eyes. This is virtual reality for your ears. And anything that's not right will pull you out of that virtual reality. So like, if the system doesn't make the speakers disappear, it's not going to have that VR quality. If there's frequency stuff, or, you know, there's sonic things that are fatiguing, it's going to pull you out of that VR. But when everything's right and everything's dialed in, and you've got a system that sounds 3D, and it's got warmth, and it's got enough distortion where it sounds real. Because when you're at an actual show, the sound's not usually super clean, and there's a little bit of distortion, you know, things that aren't absolutely perfect. But that's part of the experience, and that's part of what draws you into and makes it feel the VR experience. And so, I've never heard anybody talk about how HiFi is a form of virtual reality, but I think that helps explain to people that don't know what we're talking about, or why this is such a draw to us, that they understand it then. Because she was like, oh, yeah, that does sound cool. And that's why the nuances of, you know, using the right tubes in your preamp, or having a tube rectifier versus solid state rectification, into all those little details, having the right needle in the cartridge. And honestly, vinyl is what really gives me that experience through a good phono stage, and having speakers placed and sized correctly for the room is what creates that whole virtual reality that you are at a concert. And you can close your eyes and you can visualize the singer at the microphone and the bass players over here and the drums are back there. And it does have that whole 3D ambiance. And you're not, oh, that's coming out of the left speaker and that's the right speaker. If you start hearing the speakers, it's game over. The curtain's been lifted. And that's really the hard part of this whole deal, is getting things working as a system. And that's one of the things that I'm going to focus on doing with Skunkie Designs, is recommending, here are components that I know work well together. Like this phono stage and this amp. You hook those two together. Don't put anything in between them. And like this color preamp, it's not going to work good with that EL34 amp. And there's customers out there that have asked me, I want to buy all three, I want to buy all your stuff. And I'm going to call them back up and talk to them and say, don't buy this. This is not going to be needed or even welcome with that EL34 amp, because it's got enough input sensitivity, and the EAR 834 clone phono stage has a hot enough output where it's a waste to have this in the system, and it's just one more thing in the system to pollute the sound that will disrupt the goodness that you're going to get out of your speakers. And so, hey, maybe from a business model it's dumb to talk people out of buying gear, but this really isn't going to be designed to work with that EL34 amp. KT120 monoblocks, absolutely. This thing really solves the, too clean sound that it had. It was too sterile. This picks it up a notch while it keeps the bass punch that those KT120s have. The 300B amp really doesn't need this. It's already got a nice warmth to it, and it doesn't need any color added to it. Now, if you've got a solid state system and you're trying to get it to that level of, the transparent speakers that just disappear into the wall, you don't even hear them, it's just turns into a room full of sound, this could get you there. And that's the kind of system that this is going to be designed for. And it's got tunability to get you there. So, yeah. Anyway, you're looking at this going, wait a minute, that doesn't look like the color preamp that you built or showed on the channel earlier. And it's not. And I know some of you people are going to go crazy saying, man, you're being an idiot with your business model. Hey guys, I'm doing this for fun. And I'm not expecting to sell like a ton of stuff. And my goal is to get people to that VR sound where it sounds like you're there. And if that means custom building stuff for people in a one-off kind of a thing, then that's what we're going to do. I'm building these pretty much one at a time anyway. And when I've done like, quote, production stuff, I may be fabbing up several chassis at the same time, but I'm not doing them in a way that they can't be custom tailored to someone. So this guy wrote me and said, hey, I want one of your color preamps. I'll buy one of your wood ones, but I'd really rather have one in black metal. I like that more industrial design. And we emailed back and forth, and I'm happy to talk on the phone or email back and forth, whichever people are more comfortable with. I know some people are kind of introverted and don't like talking on the phone or whatever, and that's fine. You know, I'm not going to push on that. But anyway, this guy, we emailed back and forth, and I was like, hey, you know, if I'm going to custom build a metal one versus the, you know, wood one that I already have a template for, I really can't save you any money. And he's like, that's fine. It's not the money. I just like the aesthetics of it. And so then I started thinking about it. It's like, well, without the wood, you don't have to put the volume control on the top. You can put it on the front. And we can put the power switch on the front. And then it's like, you know, I was going to originally build it oriented like this, which is what we did with the wood version. And had the volume control in the front, the two tubes, and the rectifier tube was about where this little screen is, and the power transformer in the back. And then I started looking at it, and it's like, you know, he wants RCA jacks on the back if I could do that. And if I turn the whole thing sideways, then I can do the RCA jacks like this. And have two pairs of inputs, and have this as the output. Then we have a switch here with a center off that's mute. And then you have one side and then the other. Then we put our two adjuster screws here. And then we don't need to use shielded wire right here because all this is super close together. And then we can just do shielded wire from here to the tubes. And then to the volume control, and then shielded wire back. And shouldn't be that complicated to wire it up this way. And doing it this way, like I've done my amps, I know on this size chassis that, you know, we have all the AC stuff and the power supply kind of pushed over here in the corner, and then we got this nice gap here in the middle where there's nothing. And I know some people will be tempted to say, oh, well, you could just shrink the amp up and move these tubes over here and make it this wide, but then you're risking picking up noise with these unshielded wires going to the switch, and I just like keeping things separated. And so, yeah, it makes a little bigger preamp. That's just the way it's going to be. And if somebody wants me to build a smaller one that's going to compromise what I feel is going to be the audio perfection, I'm not going to build it. And so this is what we ended up with. And it could be people, I know some people are in the queue for a color preamp that I haven't built them one of the wood ones yet. They may mail back and say, hey, I like this metal one better, and I like the layout of it better. I can't really do this with the wood one, at least with the chassis I have now, but in the future maybe we can figure out some way to do them more in this shape. And anyway, I guess the bottom line of what I'm saying is, if you got something that you want built, send me an email. I am going to try to stick to the format on that EAR 834 clone. I've kind of explored some ideas of some other options. I think I talked about earlier about trying to maybe build a smaller footprint one. I'm just not really sure if that's worth exploring. These China boards work so good, and I know they sound so good. And I'm not sure if I switch to another board layout and then have to spend hours of listening back to back to make sure that there's no sonic goodness being lost. And I honestly like the way those look, and people seem to be buying them like they are. I'm going to leave that alone, and those are just going to be built. Silver and gold are the only options. When it comes to stuff like this color preamp, you know, I'm happy with the way this turned out. I think the little vent looks cool, and the little small knob, I think everything turned out really cool on this one. So if you want your color preamp built like this, make sure you email me and tell me you want, hey, I want this instead of the wood one, or I'll go ahead and build some of the wood ones too. So what else have we got going on? Well, you're looking over here at these transformers, saying, hey, Skunkie, those look new. Yep, they are. Finally got my transformers that I custom ordered from Thermionic Labs. They wound this one specifically for me with a smaller current gap than they would normally do on this 20-watt transformer. And the reason that I had them do this is I was thinking about using these on the EL34 amp. You know, as something to try. But obviously, I don't have the little 15-watt Ed cores here, but this thing is a beast. and it's not going to fit on that chassis, then I'm going to have to like build a bigger chassis. And then, I know it's not supposed to matter. We're listening to these, not looking at them, but I still want them to look nice. And I just feel like these are going to look out of scale with the EL34 tubes. And for the higher end option, we do have the ISO Tango transformers, which I'm still working on that amp. Haven't listened to it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to sound really nice. So I'm thinking about building a pair of KT88 monoblock single-ended amps. And before you guys start crying, say, no more single-ended amps, I want push-pull, whatever. Guys, I think I'm going to focus on single-ended amps. I know there's some people that really love push-pull amps. I just don't think that they have the magic that a single-ended amp has. And if I'm going to be known for something, I would rather be known for having really good single-ended amps than putting out some, mediocre push-pull amps to try to get some kind of a sound. When you get into push-pull stuff, you get into a much more complicated deal because you're splitting the signal and then reassembling it. And then when you start putting negative feedback in it, there's phase changes and there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. And I've told you before, I'm not an engineer. I'm not professionally trained as, in electronics or anything. But I do think I really grasp what's going on with these tubes, especially single-ended amps. And I think not being an engineer has some advantages that I'm not going into this having been told, hey, that doesn't make any difference. Or, hey, once you do the math on this, that's the end of it. Or once you've simmed something, then you've kind of gotten there. Because as you've seen on this channel, we've stumbled across some things like that Solene cap in the power supply that I still don't understand what's going on with that. And honestly, I don't need to. And maybe that's because I'm not an engineer. That I just accept that I tested that and that sounds the way it does. And it's the same with like some of my amps where I've tried different coupling caps. And I've tried these MyFlexes and Jupiters and all these expensive boutique caps that, a lot of people rave about. I just haven't heard the improvement and actually think they sound worse than these Mundorf aluminum oil caps. I don't even like the gold silver Mundorf caps. I don't think they sound as good, at least with the way my circuits are designed. And some other things I've stumbled across is I think these single-ended amps sound better running at really high voltage, and they also sound better when you run the tubes at really high percent of their dissipation to the point just shy of them red plating or going into meltdown. And so that's the kind of stuff that I think if I'd had an engineering background, I probably would go, no, that's going to work, whatever, and then, and all that kind of stuff. I think that not being an engineer has been a benefit. And the downside, though, is when I get into really complicated amp designs, I'll admit that I just get lost. And at some point, I have to realize that there's a limitation that I'm going to have, and I'm going to stick to what I know, which is single-ended amps. So, for you guys that were hoping that I was going to build some high-powered push-pull things, you're going to have to look somewhere else. I'm not into that. So anyway, back to this. I think I'm going to build some KT88 monoblocks and try to do something on a little smaller scale than those KT120 monoblocks. The problem we ran into with those is one source of tubes, and the only ones that really seem to work on a single-ended amp when you have to run the bias high is the early production ones. And so you can't just go out and buy like a dozen KT120 tubes and put them in amps and ship them out, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to buy new old stock ones and then test them and hand cull through them until I find the ones that will bias up. And that's just not realistic doing on a production basis. And so KT88s, there's a zillion of them. And there's plenty of other tubes in that same family. I think there's a 6L6GC kind of tubes that are like 30-something watt ones, and 6550s are another one. And then, yeah, there's that whole family of tubes that would work with this. And I'm going to build it to run at 500 volts on the plate. Probably going to build them fixed bias so I don't lose any voltage across the cathode resistor. So I don't have to go with like trying to find crazy caps or having to double them up with resistors between them. And yeah, it just makes the amp more dangerous when you got like 580 volts DC versus 500. And I've found the caps that I know will work in the power supply that I did on the KT120s. Basically going to duplicate it with this, but instead of running the tubes at 100 to 110 milliamps, we're going to run them at around 60 milliamps, which is what a KT88 at 500 volts would like. And these transformers were gapped to run at below 70 milliamps. And so that will work. It should be ideal. And having the current gap close to what you're going to be running the tubes at helps the transformer be more efficient, and it also helps the high-end sparkle and just makes the amp sound cleaner. So I think we're going to look at that. Probably going to build these on a wood chassis like we did on the KT120s, and then have a matching color preamp. It's basically going to be the same kind of circuit with a 6EJ7 driver tube, with a KT88, 5AR4 rectifier, and then get the correct size power transformer, chokes, and all that stuff, and use these Thermionic Labs 5K output transformers. So I think that's going to be one of my next builds. Then we have these big guys, which are some more Thermionic Lab transformers, 300B units. They're designed to work on the R300. And got to talk to the owner of that R300, make sure that he wants to really dive into this thing and spend some money on it. If he doesn't, probably going to be done with his project, because if I can't put some really good output transformers on it, there's no point in doing anything else to it. And we are going to do this and put these good transformers. We're going to gut the amp. We're going to change the front end design. Probably going to go with cathode bias. We're going to change everything because it's not a good sounding amp. And I know that my 300B amp design works really good, and I think we can apply it to that. Hopefully I can figure out a way to do it where we don't have some empty tube sockets, so we may have to get creative on the tubes we're using. And anyway, that'll be here in the future as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I guess the bottom line, what I'm trying to get at is, if you've got like some dream audio tube things that you would like built, shoot me an email. And if it sounds interesting, let's build it. Again, I can't give this stuff away, and I think most of y'all seem to understand that. But I think that I'm going to enjoy this more, doing this more as a custom build kind of thing. And again, I'm going to keep making those EAR 834 clone preamps, and I'm going to keep moving forward on the EL34 amps and get some of those built. But some custom stuff would be fun too. And again, I'm still waiting on the transformers. Hopefully I'm going to get some of them here soon. I've got some resistors that I ordered 2 months ago, and I just got an email from Mauser that it's going to be another 2 months before they get here. And so some of this stuff is going to take forever, and that's why I'm happy to try to fill in with some other projects with parts that I have here. And some of the things like these color preamps, the parts are a lot easier to get than they are these amplifiers. I mean, I ordered these transformers in November, and I just got them this week. So anyway, I think that's enough for this Monday video. Hope you're enjoying my channel. If you are, please subscribe, please like the video, and thanks to all you folks that are supporting the channel. I'm going to try to keep doing this YouTube stuff as well, because I enjoy it, and I know you do too. Appreciate donations to the website when I'm giving you help and that sort of thing. Also, thanks to all you Patreon supporters. And let's keep going to create the audio gear that we need to enjoy audio VR. We'll see you for the next Monday monologue.